Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar today. The topic for today's webinar is Connected Solutions, how a new program improves the economics and social benefits of solar+storage in Massachusetts and beyond. This webinar is presented by Clean Energy Group as part of our Resilient Power project. And we have a number of excellent speakers with us on the line today. Before I pass it over to them, I'd like to go over a few quick webinar logistics. You have a couple of options for joining the audio portion of today's webinar. You can call in via telephone, or you can connect using your computer mic and speakers. If you'd like to minimize the webinar console so that you can view the presentation full screen, you can click on the orange arrow that you see circled there, and you can also click on that to expand the webinar console. And one thing that you might like to do with your webinar console is to submit questions and comments. We want to hear from you. We're going to save some time following our presentations for a Q&A with the audience, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. So do type your questions in when you think of them. Don't wait until the very end. And a final note, this webinar is being recorded. We will be posting a copy of the webinar recording and a PDF of the slides probably this afternoon within 48 hours at the latest. And we'll also be putting those on our website at cleanegroup.org/webinars. That's a good URL to know because it's also, in addition to being where we put our webinar archive materials, we also post information about our upcoming webinars there. And we'll tell you at the end of our webinar what we've got coming up next. Lots of good stuff. So with that, I'm going to pass it over now to Clean Energy Group Senior Project Director, Todd Olinsky-Paul. Todd will get us started today.
Thanks, Samantha, and welcome to the webinar, everybody. I'm Todd Olinsky-Paul from Clean Energy Group. It's going to be a great webinar. I want to do just a very brief introduction of our organization and programs before we get into the main presentations. So Clean Energy Group is a nonprofit. We are located in Vermont, work with states, municipalities, national laboratories, and other NGOs on clean energy issues. We do a lot of work supporting states, also supporting the development of clean energy, especially with an emphasis on low-income communities. I want to mention that a couple of things. One is that we have a sister organization, Clean Energy States Alliance, which works more directly with states for their clean energy programs. And the other thing I want to mention is that we are very grateful to our many foundation supporters, whose logos you can see on the screen. For this particular presentation, we're going to be talking about the Connected Solutions program. If you look at the report covers on the screen, the most recent reports, these are specifically addressing the program we're going to be talking about today. They're available on our website, as are all our reports and webinars, which are archived, searchable, and everything we do is available on our website. The overall structural thrust is called the Resilient Power Project. That's a solar and storage behind-the-meter focused project that is devoted to increasing public-private investment in clean, resilient power systems, mostly solar and storage. We look to do this to protect low-income and vulnerable communities with a focus on affordable housing and critical public facilities, and we'll be talking today about how affordable multifamily housing facilities can access this install solar and storage behind the meter. If you could go to the next slide, please. In addition to the work that we're going to present today, which is split between policy work and economic analysis, we also do a lot of direct support for solar and storage projects across the country. more than 250 of them to date, and you can see some of those represented on the map. Next slide, please. So I want to do a brief introduction. Actually, Seth Mullendor, Vice President and Project Director from Clean Energy Group, is our moderator for today. I believe he's joined us now, was unavoidably a few minutes late. Seth, if you're here and you want to jump in and introduce yourself, say a few words, and kick it off.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Todd. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. Sorry for the delay. So yes, I'm Seth Mullendor, Vice President and Project Director with the Clean Energy Group. So I'm going to introduce our great panelists today. You already met Todd, but I'll introduce him in a minute. First, I'd like to introduce you all to Jeff Oxnam. Jeff is the founder of American Microgrid Solutions. He is a microgrid developer and former utility executive with more than 2 decades of experience in energy, utilities, telecommunications, and infrastructure. Jeff has managed strategic planning, operations, marketing, and communications efforts for utilities and environmental organizations. Jeff earned a Bachelor's of History from Williams College and an MBA from the Johns Hopkins University Carey Business School. Maryland Governor Larry Hogan appointed Jeff to chair the Maryland Energy Commission Center Board of Directors and to sit on the board of the Maryland Energy Innovation Institute. And I'll say that Jeff and his team over at American Microgrid Solutions have been a trusted partner for the work that we've done through the Resilient Power Project in assessing the feasibility of solar and storage for community serving facilities. So Jeff is going to be speaking about the economic analysis that we did on multifamily affordable housing. And then Todd Alinsky-Paul is going to introduce the Connected Solutions program and the policy benefits of the program as well. Todd is a senior project director for Clean Energy Group and Clean Energy States Alliance, and he directs the Energy Storage and Technology Advancement Partnership project, which is a federal and state funding information sharing project that aims to accelerate the deployment of energy storage technologies in the United States. Todd also works on resilient power and solar and storage, fuel cells, combined heat and power for critical infrastructure and energy resiliency. His recent work is focused on energy storage technologies and policy, renewable thermal generation and siting issues, wind energy siting issues, renewable energy and grid interactions, financing and policy initiatives, and emerging technologies. He's authored numerous reports for state and federal agencies. Todd joined CISA and CEG from the Pace Energy and Climate Center, where he served as the manager of communications, education, and outreach, as well as an energy policy analyst. Todd has a master's in environmental policy from Bard College and a BA from Brown University. So with that, I'll turn it over to Todd and Jeff.
Remind me to shorten that bio. That was okay. Well, I've been asked to introduce the Connected Solutions program before Jeff goes into details about the economic analysis. So what is it? Basically, the Connected Solutions battery program originated in Massachusetts just a couple of years ago, a few years ago now. And the essential elements of it's part of Mass Save, which is the state's energy efficiency program. So the essential sort of key to this and why it works so well, I think, for one reason, is that that it pulls behind the meter or small distributed battery storage as a technology into the state's energy efficiency program. And the way that that's done is that batteries, as everyone knows, are not generators. They don't reduce net consumption of electricity generally, but what they are very good at is shifting consumption and shifting it away from peak times when electricity is very expensive to off-peak times when electricity is relatively inexpensive. And so by shifting the load and shifting the demand for electricity from peak hours to off-peak hours, batteries can very effectively make the regional grid more efficient. And that means that ratepayers save money. The way this works is that they can purchase or lease a battery and then sign a multi-contract with their utility. That means that they're signing up, in this case in Massachusetts, it's a 5-year contract, saying that the utility can call on those batteries, which are located in the home or business of the customer and belong to the customer or to a third party that leases the battery to the customer. Utilities can call on those batteries during peak times to reduce the cost of meeting those peaks. Now, third-party aggregators, I mentioned, can lease batteries. They can also market the program to customers, enroll them, aggregate their many customers, and to the utility. The customer in this agreement receives performance payment revenues from the utility based on how much their battery is able to respond to utility signals for dispatch. They also receive resilience benefits because having a battery behind your meter means that in case of a grid outage, if you're set up for it, you can then island your home or business from the grid and self-power your critical loads until the grid comes back on. And if you have PV in addition, then you can recharge that battery when the sun is shining. The performance payments that customers receive under this program can be combined with other incentive programs in Massachusetts as well. So, for example, you can sign up for the Smart Solar program, which also has a battery storage adder, which is a sort of a rebate program. You can also sign up for the Clean Peak Standard, which enables you to generate Clean Peak certificates, and those are valuable. And you can also sign up for the ConnectedSolutions program and do other things like demand charge management. So you can stack these benefits, and you'll see when Jeff talks about the economics for multifamily affordable housing that stacking these benefits is very important and can result in very good payback in well under the lifespan of the system. So opt out of dispatch calls. So if you have some other use for your battery when the utility wants to use it, or if you think that there might be an outage and you want to retain the battery's full charge just in case, you can simply opt out. There's no penalty. It does reduce your average response, which slightly reduces your payout at the end of the season, but there's no penalty for doing that. And from the utility's point of view, they pay only for the services they actually receive. So if the customer signs up for the program and never allows their battery to participate, then the utility doesn't pay for that. The ConnectedSolutions program sounds a lot like demand charge management in the sense that batteries are being used to reduce peak load, but it's really very different in several important ways. One thing is that all customers in regulated utility territory can participate in ConnectedSolutions once the state adopts the program, regardless of customer type, location, or the type of demand curve that their facility or home might have. So this is very different. Demand charge management is generally something that only commercial customers can do, and it really depends on whether or not you're paying a high enough demand charge, whether you have a peaky demand curve, and other kinds of things that make it really not a very practical way for a lot of customers to make a battery pay off. By comparison, ConnectedSolutions can be accessible to anybody, commercial and residential. Underserved communities can access the program. You don't have to have a large load. You don't have to be able to predict your load. The multi-year pay-for-performance contract structure really serves to reduce risk, the economic risk in energy storage investment, because it doesn't rely on guesswork to meet individual facility peaks. You're simply responding to a utility signal and getting paid for it. That makes it easier for developers to put together project pipelines, and especially in underserved communities. And because the behind-the-meter batteries are used to reduce system-wide peaks, not individual customer peaks, they are benefiting all ratepayers. The way that the individual batteries are aggregated is sometimes called a virtual power plant, or a VPP structure. It means that many batteries are kind of pulled into a single system and dispel at once. It allows privately owned batteries to provide public cost savings. And in this program, customers are paid for exporting power as well as reducing load. And that's important. If you're doing demand charge management, you can reduce your load to a certain point. But beyond that, you can't get further benefit from your battery. In this program, if you reduce your load to zero and you have extra energy in the battery, you can then export that to the grid and get paid for that as well. That also expands the benefits of the grid, because it means that behind the meter systems can do more to reduce demand peaks regionally. So here's an example of how this works for an individual customer. And you'll get a lot more detail on this kind of stuff from Jeff in a minute, but I wanted to give kind of an overview of how the economics work. So let's say a commercial customer signs a contract with their utility, installs a 60 kilowatt hour battery, signs up for the summer daily dispatch program. There are several different programs, by the way, that you could sign up for. In this case, they're getting a $200 per kilowatt payment for performance. And because the performance calls are 3 hours in duration, in other words, the utility your battery over a 3-hour period, then that means that the 60 kilowatt is able at best to provide 20 kilowatts per hour on average of load reduction or energy export. You take that 20 kilowatt average load reduction, you multiply it by the $200 incentive rate, and you see that this customer would be able to get at best a $4,000 seasonal payout for that one summer season. Then you multiply that over the lifespan of the battery, and you can pretty well determine what the revenues are going to look like. So that's my introduction. I'm going to pass the baton over to Jeff Oxnam for some more details on new results of economic analysis, specifically for multifamily affordable housing facilities.
Great, thanks, Todd. Really appreciate it, and thanks to Seth and Samantha and the full Clean Energy Group team. It's been our thrill and pleasure here at American Microgrid Solutions to work with Clean Energy Group over the last number of years, looking not only here in Massachusetts, but at projects all over the country. And at American Microgrid Solutions, we do a lot of work with affordable housing, affordable multifamily housing projects in probably a little bit over a dozen states right now. This is something near and dear to our hearts and the mission of our company. As Todd's indicated, the purpose of our work on this project has been to take a look at what the impact of connected solutions can be on the economics of projects. And what we did was we selected a number of projects that we've already, that we had looked at previously under different Massachusetts programs, and normalized them to take a look at how they would have, what the economics to those projects would have been prior to Connected Solutions, and then what they look like today with Connected Solutions. We'll talk a little bit in a second about how we get there to be able to look at apples to apples. But the results have been very encouraging. As I said, we did this analysis with Clean Energy Group, American Microgrid, and our long-term techno-economic partners, MuGrid Analytics, who helped drive the analysis of some of these design options. What we found is that these new clean energy incentive programs in Massachusetts are really starting to show promise and improve project feasibility, even as Todd mentioned, in a profile that can be as challenging as multifamily housing. Multifamily housing is maybe one of the toughest cases to look at because the load profiles aren't like manufacturing or industrial, where you might have these big peaks in the middle of the day where batteries are perfectly suited to help tame those. The load profiles, how these facilities use energy, are a lot more subtle, which would take some arrows out of our quiver in terms of what hybrid or resilient power solutions would do. That said, what's happened in Massachusetts has really helped improve the value both to the facility and to the grid from these systems. What we noticed, and we'll look at in a second, the program has helped improve rates of return on the project and reduced payback periods on these projects. They can create more predictable revenue streams because now you're engaging in longer term programs that create more surety about what's happening down the road. SMART does that over a long window, Connected Solutions over a shorter window, but a multi-year window. They also have the advantage of the resilience and the enhanced sustainability, that being able to help every other effort on the grid to nip the peak in the middle of those days when we're really leaning on peakers is leading to lower emissions. So the methodology for what American Microgrid and MuGrid Analytics did on this project, working with Clean Energy Group. Again, we were really focused on the Connected Solutions program and how that impacts solar and storage on affordable housing. We did a techno-economic analysis using property details and electricity usage data from 6 different multifamily affordable housing properties in Massachusetts, some in Eversource, some in National Grid. We evaluated solar and PV and obviously the interface with the grid. It's important to mention that the solutions we looked at were vendor agnostic, but commercially available technology. To do the analysis, we used MuGrid's Red Cloud tool, a design and optimization platform that models the performance of a combination of different assets towards a specific goal, and then models the operation of those assets as they go through an annual cycle. We included SMART, which is the sort of baseline incentive program now, and we looked at it with and without Connected Solutions. That is what we're after. In our, we looked at a couple of ownership scenarios, and where we had a taxable entity, we included the ITC and makers benefits for those taxable entities. Those, of course, are not available to tax-exempt entities. So we really looked at those two, a host owned by a for-profit entity and a host owned by a nonprofit entity. What we did not do in this study on purpose was look at the impact of a third-party owned scenario, because there you're adding in a lot of other variables, including expected returns, the type of entity, the capital structure, all worthy and important elements, and involved every time American Microgrid Solutions looks at an individual site and project. But again, we wanted to see what Connected Solutions was doing specifically. We used 6 different sites at that we had originally visited at different periods under different incentive programs. So in order to isolate the Connected Solutions program, we had to normalize certain things. Assumptions about site conditions, installation costs, interconnection constraints, all to make sure that we were comparing apples to apples to see what Connected Solutions was doing. The solar sizing was also held constant. Part of what we do when we look at an individual site out of this constraint would normally be to adjust any of the sizes of the on-site generation and storage assets to meet the particular goals of that site. In this case, we kept solar constant when we looked at the scenario so we could see, okay, what is Connected Solutions doing? So that obviously it leads us to our first sort of big note and disclaimer. Site conditions, economic assumptions, and other factors have a huge impact on specific projects. These results should be understood from their directional basis and from what they say about the value of Connected Solutions as it is applied and what the promises in these programs, but you can't simply take these results and apply them to other sites at other times and other places. There are too many other factors. This does speak very directly and uses real case studies to show what the impact of Connected Solutions has been under those assumptions. This gives you a quick look at the red cloud model. And again, what MuGrid's model does is really takes in all the different factors from economics, utility tariff, assets, and their dispatch and operation to optimize the results. The sites we looked at, there are 6 sites of varying age, as young as 2012 and as old as 1978, with a variety of different numbers of units, on average probably around 150 or so, as you can see here. And we had 4 sites in Eversource, 2 in National Grid, and the Eversource sites were in a few different areas. We'll look at the charts in a second, but I'll give you a sense here of what the results we found were when we compared systems that were optimized for demand charge management alone versus the ones that were optimized for using Connected Solutions. Internal rates of return improved pretty significantly. 26% improvement on the nonprofit owned models that we looked at, and 36% for the tax exempt entities. This is, again, prior, when comparing with Connected Solutions to prior to. Net present value improved on all of these projects as well. Simple payback period decreased pretty significantly when we looked at the Connected Solutions, 17% shorter for both ownership arrangements, and really got within the windows that we often see expected by the host themselves and others who are interested in that third-party opportunity. We saw utility savings actually increase with the systems that favored the Connected Solutions optimized design, almost a 14% improvement in utility savings. Now that's before the cost of these systems, but in just the reduction on the utility bill alone. And then we saw that the system favored batteries, not surprisingly, that had both larger power and more energy, longer duration batteries than what was previously favored by the models on the pre-Connected Solutions. Here's a quick look at how that came out on the battery design. You get a sense of where the solar sizing generally was for these. The largest was 250 kW, the smallest 40 kW system. And initially, only 2 of the sites favored batteries without connected solutions. The others, basically, the model said it doesn't make economic sense to include the battery. With the connected solutions, all of the sites favored including a battery, and those that had the battery previously saw both an increase in the power and in the duration. So we can take a little bit more direct look here at the specific numbers. The blue is the systems designed prior to connected solutions, optimized for demand charge management. And the green is what was the results were for the connected solutions optimized system. And you see that the IRRs for the tax exempt entity increased pretty significantly, as did the ones for the taxable entity. Now, again, bear in mind that the normalization of some of the assumptions is going to lead to a higher or lower nominal internal rate of return than might be seen on another site outside of this. But the directional impact is very evident. Net present value. This was, again, an area that we saw significant improvement. This assumes a 25-year project life with a 9% discount rate. And you can see that some of the sites started out in the negative NPV territory, as you would expect. Those all turned positive with the connected solutions benefit. In the non-tax eligible system, again, as one would expect, the NPVs in some of them were even more negative without the advantage of some of the other federal tax incentives. Those gaps narrowed in several of the projects and went, well, they narrowed in all of them, and in some of them it turned negatives to positive. Simple payback period obviously would be impacted by this as well. And we see a significant drop from the taxable entity down into the sub 8-year range. And then for the non-taxable entity, getting also even more aggressively reduced as a result of having the availability of the Connected Solutions program under the assumptions and conditions. Here's a quick look at the utility savings. Again, green is for the systems that are designed for Connected Solutions. Larger here in this case is better, higher utility savings. And in every case, the Connected Solutions design ended up generating a greater savings on the utility bill. So in general, what we found from the economics or the analysis of these 6 sites, by a regime that uses a strategy with the connected solutions, we're improving return, we're reducing payback periods, we're generally improving net present value, and we're encouraging not only the use of storage where it wasn't before, but more available storage than was there before. Individual sites, again, will have their own conditions that will really drive the economics, the specific economics to that facility. However, it is clearly evident from the work here that in multifamily affordable housing, Massachusetts' introduction of the Connected Solutions program has been a real advantage to these projects and is improving the financeability and bankability of installing solar plus storage. With that, I appreciate your time. Look forward to the questions, and I'll hand it back to Todd.
Thanks, Jeff. And thanks to your whole team as well. This has been a really interesting analysis. I think the results speak for themselves. It's as Jeff said, the reason that we wanted to look at multifamily affordable housing facilities is, well, a couple of reasons. One is we wanted to demonstrate that these facilities could economically install resilient solar and storage systems in Massachusetts under this new Connected Solutions program. And, but in part, the reason that it's so exciting is that these kinds of facilities typically, as Jeff showed, can't economically install energy storage without the Connected Solutions program because of various factors. Relatively flat demand curves and other factors make it very difficult. And in general, the reason underserved communities are, one reason that underserved communities are underserved is because it's difficult for developers to get competitive financing for these systems in these areas. So the fact that this Connected Solutions program really serves to reduce financing risk. And also in Massachusetts, there's an associated heat loan program that's available for energy efficiency improvements, which is a 0% interest loan. These are very advantageous for multifamily affordable housing facilities. We're incidentally, and Seth can speak more to this, we're working and have worked with a number of these of developers of multifamily affordable housing facilities and managers of them, and hope to see some of these facilities actually install these systems very soon. That would be the ultimate validation of the program. So I want to wrap up here by just explaining a few more sort of elements of the Connected Solutions program from more of a policy perspective and why it's beneficial and why we think other states should adopt it. In fact, other states have started to. And then we will get to as many of your questions as we can. So the basic advantage, one of the really basic advantages of this program, of course, is that it is run through the state energy efficiency program, which means that the efficiency program budget is now available to support distributed energy storage as well as other efficiency measures such as efficient appliances, weather stripping, lighting, and that sort of thing. Why is this important? Well, most states have energy efficiency programs, and you can see here this is a fairly up-to-date 2019 table of electric efficiency program spending by state. Massachusetts is way up there. Of course, Massachusetts has led the nation in energy efficiency programs, I think 9 years running. It's been the #1 program according to ACEEE. Massachusetts spends over $620 million per year on electric efficiency. So it's a well-established, well-respected program with a large budget. If you're trying to figure out how to get energy efficiency scaled up and make it available to communities, to businesses, and to residential customers, the Connected Solutions program being run through a state efficiency plan is a good way to do that. These programs are designed to reach overburdened communities, which need efficiency improvements. And there are some simple additions to the program that could improve accessibility for overburdened communities even further. And some of these have been proposed in other states. Like right now in Connecticut, there's a straw proposal to institute a 9-year program very similar to Connected Solutions that would feature a pay-for-performance structure, just like Connected Solutions, but in addition would feature rebates, adders for low-income participants, low-cost financing, and on-bill payment structure. So these are some very simple ways of even improving the program further for overburdened communities. As I said, other states have started to adopt the program. We see it started in Massachusetts in 2019. It's now being expanded for the next 3-year efficiency program in Massachusetts. It's also been adopted in Rhode Island and Connecticut. I mentioned there's a straw proposal for a 9-year program in Connecticut to expand on this, and it's been proposed in New Hampshire as well. Now, I mentioned earlier that, and Jeff as well mentioned that in some ways, Connected Solutions looks similar to demand response, and yet there are significant differences. And I just wanted to touch on a few of the advantages of this program being in the efficiency plan rather than in a utility demand response program. As I just mentioned, there's a lot of money in efficiency programs, and you can see here the spending nationally on energy efficiency programs far outstrips the spending on demand response programs. There's also a greater opportunity for public policy input into efficiency program development. Typically, there's a lot of public process involved in efficiency program development. States can incentivize efficiency gains through performance incentive mechanisms as well. And that it's a fancy way of saying that through an efficiency program, states are able to incentivize utilities to market and run the program aggressively. And they do that by offering incentives to compensate the utility for their losses related to efficiencies. After all, if you become more efficient in your use of electricity, you're purchasing less electricity from your utility. So in order to incentivize the utility to expand the efficiency of their customer base, it's important to provide some incentives for them to do so. Massachusetts and many other states do this through performance incentive mechanisms. That is not the case, by the way, typically with demand response programs. Furthermore, energy efficiency programs are statewide programs, and that means that there's much more equitable access to energy storage technology through an efficiency program than there is through something like a demand response program, where it's offered by maybe one utility but not another, where typically it's designed for large commercial industrial customers. You have to establish a base load compared to which you will lower your load. Typically, residential customers and small commercial customers aren't able to do this through a demand response program. And finally, the Connected Solutions model allows customer export of power to the grid. And as I said before, demand response typically is designed for load reduction alone, and that's good as far as it goes. But being able to export power encourages larger batteries. It also means that there are many more grid benefits that can be provided. We have, as I said, just a few years of experience with Connected Solutions in Massachusetts. It started in 2019. We have some early customer satisfaction and program operational results that we can report. This is from a Navigant report. It was conducted for National Grid, and they surveyed customers. The results are that most customers said that having the battery for backup power was their primary motivation for owning a battery. And they really liked the program. 94% never opted out of an event, and 97% said they would recommend the program to other customers and would be likely to continue with it. So a very high customer satisfaction rate with Connected Solutions. And utilities seem to like it as well. You can see here that it's been an effective program. Enrollment has increased over time. The average residential customer battery discharge is 5.5 kilowatts, and doing a little simple math at the residential summer payment rate of $225 per kilowatt, we can calculate that the average residential customer payment for one season for participating in this program was about $1,237. If you add in the winter season as well, you could reach a payback for a residential customer in about 6 years. And as Jeff showed, commercial customers can also do quite well with this program. So that is the end of my slides, and I want to say thanks to everybody. A good amount of time for questions, so I'll turn this back to Seth.
Great, thanks, Todd. Thank you, Jeff. So we've had a number of good questions come in. To everyone that asked, yes, this is being recorded and the slides will be available. We'll send those around to you in the next day or two, or early next week. So there were a number of questions, and I might start off fielding this one, because there seems to be some confusion about rate design and how this works under different rate structures. There were questions about, does this work with time of use rates? What level of demand charge do I need in order to make the economics work out? Jeff and Todd, please jump in after I say a bit, but the whole point of the benefit of Connected Solutions is that it doesn't matter at all what type of demand charges you have, or what type of time of use rates you have, or any to any extent the type of rate structure that you have with your utility, because it's looking at regional benefits and regional peak demand. It's not impacted at all by what your rates look like, or even how you use energy so much on your facility. So you can use this. This could be applied on top of any rate design program. It does help potentially to have high demand charges that could also be shaved. Although the analysis found, we've talked to multiple developers that have said that's such a secondary revenue stream that you don't want to prioritize peak shaving when you can go after the Connected Solutions revenue. So Jeff and Todd, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
Yeah,
No.
sure. This is Todd. Yeah, you're right. Essentially, this program, for the customer's purposes, replaces a demand charge management strategy. I mean, if you can do a little demand charge management on top, that's gravy. But essentially, the incentive, the performance payment rates are good enough that you want to, in most cases, prioritize participating in Connected Solutions. And it doesn't matter at all what demand rate you are in, what tariff you're in, what your demand curve looks like. You sign up, you discharge the battery when the utility asks you to, and they pay you.
Yeah,
Right, Jeff?
I'd echo that. I think that, as we said earlier, the challenge with multifamily housing is that it tends not to be very peaky with its demand. It's one thing to have a high demand charge, but if it's a high, slow ramp up to that demand charge, then your peak shaving ability, what a battery can do, is not as robust as if you peak up in very short periods of time, and a battery will go out there and really nip that peak. So it's great that this is separated from that. It is, as Todd said, and if you said, it's sort of, you can look at that demand savings as quote gravy. It can be a significant number. But generally what the results are showing when you optimize for, particularly in this sector, for Connected Solutions instead of that peak shaving, you're a lot better off.
Great. So a couple of quick questions. There was one question of whether you can participate in all three of the programs, the daily, the summer, and the winter. The answer is no, because there's two summer programs, the daily and the summer. You can only participate in one of those, but you can do one of the summer programs and the winter. There were a couple of questions about, well, several questions about how the incentives are locked in. One person was under the understanding that utilities could eliminate the incentives whenever they wanted. Another person was asking about, is it true that you get the incentive rates locked in for 5 years? How does that work? And then what happens at year 6? What do we see? And again, maybe Jeff, if you could go over, what was the assumption that was made for these models, these modeling?
Yeah, so the assumption, that the smart adders are there over the full duration of the 20 years on the smart contract, and that the connected solutions are locked in on that 5-year contract. Now, the utilities and the commission and the state go through an analysis of all incentive programs over a regular cycle, and it's different in each state. So there's some question about whether or not this program that is available, the Connected Solutions with the 5-year window, is going to be available out into the future, or if it will be changed and adjusted. We can't predict what is going to happen between the utilities, the commission, and the state out through the future. So I can't say what future contracts and future programs may look like. The analysis did assume that there was an extension of this program in some form over time.
Great.
To add to that, the Connected Solutions being part of the state energy efficiency plan is going to be expanded, we think, as of the beginning of the next 3-year cycle for efficiency, which will be January of 2022. Right now, the state is going through the process of taking a look at its entire efficiency program and designing the next iteration of that program, which runs in 3-year cycles. So there's a little bit of a mismatch. There's a 5-year contract for Connected Solutions, but the efficiency program, the state's efficiency program, runs on 3-year cycles. So if you sign up right now for Connected Solutions, yes, your rates are locked in for 5 years, but we should know by January the rates are going to look like for the next iteration of the efficiency program. If you were to start now thinking about designing a system and you signed up after January of 2022, it's possible that the rates may be different at that point. And it's also possible that other elements of the program structure might be a little different, like the contract term might be different. For example, there's no guarantee of another 5-year contract. They might go to a 7-year contract or a 3-year contract or something like that. We're relatively certain that it will continue in some form.
Right. There's a question just about the different programs available in Massachusetts. First question was, is Connected Solutions a replacement for SMART or the Clean Peak standard, which it is not. But another question about SMART, the Clean Peak standard, and Connected Solutions is, can you participate in all 3 programs at the same time?
You can.
There you go. So yes, the answer is yes. So Todd, you mentioned that that the utilities seem to like this program. There were a couple of questions about the benefits to utilities. One, why would they even go for this program? Why are they kind of allowing it? And what is the benefit that they are seeing from Connected Solution?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of benefits, and it depends on the utility. As I said, this is we know they like it because they've expanded it into the other states. So, for example, National Grid has this program both in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Eversource is running it in Massachusetts and Connecticut and has proposed it in New Hampshire. So, it seems as though they like it because they are kind of proposing it in the other territories outside of Massachusetts where they have a customer base. Why they like it? I think that for one thing, it gives them a way to procure storage without having to own storage. Sometimes they want to own storage. For example, we see a lot of big utility scale storage being built on substations, and that is the kind of storage that utilities generally like to own. They may not be as interested in owning, storage behind customer meters, but they would like to make sure that if there's storage behind customer meters, that it gets used in a way that is beneficial and doesn't cause problems for the grid or the grid operator or the utility. So because there's a performance payment structure, the ConnectedSolutions program really goes a long way toward encouraging customers' batteries at the right time. And by that I mean when there's a region demand and the utilities need that load reduction and power export from these batteries in order to help keep the grid in balance. And obviously, there are other ways to do that. There are peaker plants, and utilities can go to peaker plants for that service. But the peakers are polluting. They get paid a lot to sit idle. There's a lot of advantages to providing this peaking service with clean behind the meter resources that provide benefits to the customer and the community as well as to the utility, and don't just sit there idle waiting for a demand spike. So I think there's a lot of ways in which utilities benefit. They're also getting these performance incentive payments for running these efficiency programs. And so if the state says this is part of the program that we want you to run, generally they're happy to run it. I think that from the point of view of policymakers who have renewable energy procurement standards, sometimes they have energy storage procurement standards, they're trying to reduce emissions, they have greenhouse gas standards and so forth. Getting more solar and storage out there behind customer meters and having it serve the grid, helps the state reach its goals. So there's a lot of reasons that this is a beneficial program from a lot of different points of view.
Great. So I know we're about out of time here. Maybe time for one more question. This is just a question about if there are any costs for participating in ConnectedSolutions. One, on the utility side, does this impact the interconnection process for projects, or are there additional metering requirements? And on then the participation, participating in the program, is there any insight into what those fees look like working with someone that's going to manage the battery system? Do we know what those contracts look like? So this is probably over to you, Jeff, I would guess.
Yeah, thank you. There are some additional metering requirements with some applications or some systems. There are some interesting models on that latter question about how you manage this. So battery systems will have controls that will basically, for one, to really simplify it in the last few seconds here, they tell the battery what it needs to do and what it needs to how it needs to operate. There are operators out there that have that software that's talking to the battery to tell it what to do. And we're seeing models shift from where that was like a capital, or where it was a separate expense to go out and get a software system that you had to put in yourself, to now being a managed service. And with some of the providers, they're actually rolling that into the initial project cost which has the advantage of now making it something that can be useful when you look at the in tax incentives and everything else that goes into the program. So yes, there are additional costs. There are providers out there offering a few different models. They're tending more to software as a service, though some of those are being bundled in with the battery system itself.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Todd, for all those answers and for the great presentations. Thanks for everyone for joining us. We're going to wrap up the Q&A now, and I'm going to turn it back over to Sam to let you know some upcoming events that we have.
Great. Thank you, Seth, Todd, and Jeff. And thank you everyone who attended today. You can see some information about upcoming webinars on our screen here. You can register for those at cleanegroup.org/webinars, read more about them. And I'll just leave it with contact info on your screen here for Seth and Todd. And then finally, I'm going to put up a slide with a link to where you can find the Connected Solutions reports that we discussed today. If you'd like to read those in full, that's where you can find them. So thank you everybody for attending. We hope to see you at some of our upcoming webinars. Again, cleanegroup.org/webinars for more info on those. Thanks everybody.